Well, I want to say how much I have enjoyed being with you. I am thankful this opportunity came about, and thankful we were finally able to work out some dates. My calendar was already very full when I first got the request, and thankful we were able to work this out. I have enjoyed it, and I'm thankful to have met all of you. Thankful for you. I'm telling you, I get to experience, I get to be reminded that members of the church are the best people in the world. I know we've got our problems, and I know we've got those couple of people that are always causing problems or whatever. But I'm telling you, as a whole, the church, we're blessed with a family, and it's the family of God. And I'm thankful that I now know more of my brothers and sisters in the family of God, and thankful that I was able to be here. I appreciate you being here. I know some of you had to make some provisions. You may have had to take some time off work, move commitments around. I know that you had to do that, and I appreciate the desire you have to serve God better, and that's why you did it. Now, let's talk about something that is very relevant to the church in this country and in every country. And that is the need for the church to be completely scripturally organized. You know, there are a number of ways in which the church can be organized. It can be unscripturally organized. That's the way, you know, where you have a pastor or you have a bishop or you have some single person in charge. So it's organized, but not scripturally so. And then you can have a church that is unscripturally unorganized. This is a situation where we have those who could be serving in the role of elders or overseers, but are not. You can have a church that is scripturally unorganized. That is, that congregation doesn't have anyone who is qualified to serve in that role. So it's unorganized, but scripturally so. And then the fourth way, and this is one that ought to be the goal of everyone, and that is that it is scripturally organized. And that is that it has its own shepherds, its own overseers. That was always a priority in the New Testament church. It always was. And I am told there has never been an eldership in this country. And I don't know exactly why. So I don't know if it's scripturally unorganized, some congregations scripturally unorganized, or some perhaps are unscripturally unorganized. But at any rate, I think we can all agree it is not yet at the ideal level. And I know that is a concern for you. And I find that situation all over the world. This is by far not the first. In fact, this is now many countries I've been where there's not a single eldership in the entire country. And in countries far bigger than yours, with far more congregations. So what is the challenge? What is the problem? Let me say it this way. My experience has been where the church is scripturally organized, it has been because it was a priority of the evangelists to make that happen. And where it is not the case, it has often been because the evangelists did not want it to happen. I have asked in other countries, why are there no elders? And the number one answer, there are several answers, but the number one answer I get is the preachers don't want it. Preacher doesn't want an eldership. He doesn't want anyone to have authority over him. He doesn't want to take the chance that maybe they would want a different preacher. He doesn't want to give up the authority that he has enjoyed for all of these years. And so for him, he's okay with the way things are. That's the number one answer that I am told by people in their own country. I don't know what your answer would be. But I do know that the evangelist plays a very important role in helping the church be fully organized and scripturally organized like we read in Scripture. And that's going to be our focus for a few minutes this afternoon, because I know I'm talking to some evangelists. I know I'm talking to some people who have an opportunity to use that influence for good. So, what is the role? What is the role of the evangelist in helping the church establish leadership? Because, once there is an eldership, okay, then at least theoretically it now takes care of itself. But how do you get started? Okay, that's the number one question. How do we first have elders? That's our focus this afternoon. Number one, and I'm going to talk about how the evangelist is key in obtaining this. Number one, there is biblical precedent for one man to help obtain organization in the church. There's biblical precedent for one man to be involved in organizing God's people. Long before the establishment of the church, long before the new covenant, Moses appointed elders, that's the term that was used, elders, to positions of leadership. Now, let me first say this. Don't think of this term elders in the same term we think of in the New Testament church. Likely these were heads of certain family groups, and that's just what they called them, okay? We're not saying these are men equivalent to shepherds in the New Testament church, okay? That's not the point. But the point is this. God used one man, Moses, to appoint leadership for his people. And I'm going to give you two passages. Exodus 18 and Deuteronomy 1. In Exodus 18, he appointed these elders. And in Deuteronomy 1 talks about how well it worked. So again, these are not elders in the New Testament sense. But the point is this. God used an individual servant to appoint a leadership that would serve God's people. That's the point. Long before the New Testament church, long before the New Covenant. And so there is precedent for God using one man to help establish a leadership that would serve God's people. Second, point number two, there is scriptural authority for this practice. I mean, how do we get started? How do we get an eldership in the first place? Well, there is scriptural authority for one man being the catalyst to get this started and to see it through. Number one, under this, Paul did this. I'm going to give you some biblical, some references that show the scriptural authority for this. Paul did this. Acts chapter 14, 21 through 23. Acts 14, 21 to 23, Paul went back around to those churches and he did what? He appointed elders in each of them. Now I don't think we need to understand that he went to some church where he didn't know anybody and he said, hey, you, and you're elders. No. That's not at all what I think we would believe about that, especially when you read about the qualifications of elders. If these were strangers to Paul, how would he ever know if they were qualified? What I'm saying is he led the process. And I'm going to talk later about how that's done. But for now, I'm saying there's scriptural authority for one person, typically the evangelist, to lead in the practice of establishing elders. Also, not only did Paul do this, Titus did this as well. Titus chapter 1 and verse 5. Titus 1:5, Paul is writing through inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and he tells Titus, I need you to do two things. Titus 1:5, I need you to do two things. Number one, I need you to set things in order. There were things that were missing, things that were lacking. One of those is, and you read it from the context, was what? Elders. Some things are lacking. You need to set some things straight. That's the first thing. The second thing is to appoint elders in every city. which is directly related to the first point. Why were some things lacking? Why were some things needing to be set in order? They didn't have any leaders. There was no leadership. And so he says, when you have elders, they're going to set things straight. They are going to, one of the reasons they have to know the Word is because that way they can then go against those who are teaching false doctrine and set them straight. Where there's no leadership, there's no vision. Where there's no leadership, there's really nothing that unifies us. Judges chapter 17 and verse 6 says, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what? What was right in his own eyes. There's no one in charge, so we'll just do our own thing. And that happens sometimes in the church where there's not someone in charge. And that's why Paul says you need to get things in order. You need to appoint those elders. That's a priority. When you go through that first century church, it was a priority every time for there to be elders in a congregation. Not in a city, not one set of elders for all of Corinth, not that at all. I don't think we have any reason to believe that. In fact, most of the churches would have been small house churches. But even at that, there was a priority to establish leadership, scripturally organized. And Titus and Paul had the scriptural authority to play this role in helping to establish church leadership. Now, number 3. Let's notice some practical considerations for this practice. Maybe it sounds good in theory, but how does this actually work? How does it actually work for the evangelist to take the lead, not in an overbearing way, but he's still a humble servant, but he knows the priority that God has on leadership for each congregation, and he wants to take the lead on it? What are some practical ways to do that? I'm going to list a few. Number 1, he's going to need to overcome the obstacles that may exist to complete church organization. You know that even though complete church organization is a scriptural thing and a desirable thing, not everyone is for it. Sometimes for a number of reasons, and as I've already said, sometimes it's the preacher who most is opposed to it. Well, he's going to have to make sure that his attitude is right, and he may also have to educate the church about that. Remember the principle about change? The longer an organization has gone without change, the harder it will be to make change. If this church has never had elders, been in existence for 20 years, and never, not this one, any church, for 20 years, and never had them, there may be some who are naturally resistant to that. Now, he's going to have to begin to take time to gradually overcome those objections and those obstacles. One of the ways he's going to do that is by preaching the whole counsel of God. You cannot study the New Testament and come away without a realization that God has a priority on church leadership. He knows how we are. He created us, right? He knows that we need leadership. It was a priority among those in the first century, and then he spelled out qualifications. He spells out roles. He tells us how we're to respond as followers. This is a priority. When we preach the whole counsel of God, we'll help people see that. So number 1, he's going to need to overcome the objections that may exist. Number 2, he needs to look for potential candidates. Let me ask you this. In the church where you preach, if you preach, are there prospective elders? Now, I did not ask, are there men who are right now, as of today, October 26, 2017, ready to be an elder? I did not ask that. I am asking, are there any prospective candidates? Because they don't have to be ready now. And here's part of our problem. We've not been looking ahead. Have we? I don't know about you. I'm making a general statement. Generally, we don't think ahead. Here's a young man that's 20 years old, and he's not married. You think of him as a prospective elder? Probably not. But I'm telling you, you should. You should. They don't have to be ready now. But is there potential? Is he a prospective elder? And it's because it is important. Here's another leadership principle. It is important to see people as they can be, not as they are. Did you get me? We need to be seeing people as they can be, not as they are. That 20-year-old man who's not married, doesn't even have a girlfriend, he's a prospective elder. Absolutely he is. Because likely one day he will be married and have a family, and he'll be 45 years old, and his children will be faithful, and he will have proven himself in so many different ways. But you know what? He doesn't just wake up one day and suddenly he's qualified. There is a maturing process. And when you have identified those prospective candidates, I want you to just make a list. No one needs to ever see that list. But make that list. And then pray for those men. Pray for those men. Pray for the church. Pray that they will stay on the straight and narrow, that they will one day be qualified if they aren't now. Maybe they are qualified now, except they have no desire. Or except that right now they are the only one who is qualified. I think we're probably in agreement on the need for a plurality of elders to make an eldership. So there's one right now. What are we praying for then? Another. But you see what happens is many times we don't even think about it. We just do the same thing the way we've always done it. We've never had elders. We're okay. We don't care. We just go through the motions week in and week out, and we don't think about it. We don't pray about it. We don't look for prospective elders. We just keep doing what we've always been doing. I would encourage you to go back to the book of Acts and see it was a priority. In fact, Paul is scolding Titus that he's not already done this. I think I can paraphrase Paul by saying, what are you waiting on, Titus? I mean, these churches have been in existence and they don't have elders yet. And as a result, some things are lacking and some things need to be set in order, and you need to fix this. It's a priority to God. The question is it a priority to us? Number 2, look for prospective candidates. Number 3, practical suggestion is we need to teach and nurture those potential elders. Teach and nurture the potential elders. You now have a list. And maybe you're adding to it, maybe you're subtracting, but you have a list and you're praying for them. But now there are some ones who need to mature spiritually. And they need to develop as potential leaders. But again, we're going to see them as they can be and not as they are. What about this? What if you nurture them one-on-one at times that they are not even aware of what you're doing? So you're going to go on a Bible study. Are you going by yourself? Or are you going to give him a call and say, hey, I'm going on a Bible study. Would you like to go with me? You don't even have to say a word. And he says, yes. Oh, now what? He's learning. He sees what soul winning looks like. He knows how to teach. He's learning these things. His spiritual interest is developing. It's growing. He doesn't know what's happening, but you do. You're going to go visit someone in the hospital. Are you going by yourself? Or are you going to call one of the men on that list? Because if anyone's sick among you, let him do what? Yeah, exactly. Why? Because the shepherds care for the sheep. So he's learning this, and this interest is growing in him, and you are nurturing him one-on-one so that he will be qualified. I would also suggest that there are times when, for a particular man, you should plant the seed of interest in becoming an elder. Go ahead and plant that seed. Tell him that he needs to aspire to the office of an elder. 1 Timothy 3:1, anyone who aspires to the elder aspires for what? A good work. A good work. But what if he's never thought about it? I have a good friend. In fact, he is the president of the Bear Valley Bible Institute. Been a man of great influence among many for many years, and he will tell you that he never thought about being a preacher until when he was 7 years old. A man at church said, "You're going to be a preacher one day." The seed was planted. Now, when he was 7, he was sure that was not true. But the seed had been planted. And what if we say to our young men, instead of, "One day you're going to be a great soccer star," or "You're going to be a great doctor," what if we say, "One day you're going to be an elder in God's church"? What if we start planting those seeds now? You see, we have to be thinking about it. And it has to be a priority. And it has to be intentional. And I'm telling you, brethren, you as the evangelist, you are in the single most influential position to make it happen. It doesn't have to be you, but I'm telling you, it's going to be you if it's going to happen at all. Number 4, from a practical consideration, number 4, you need to educate the church about church organization. You need to educate. It's your job. As one who preaches the whole counsel of God, you are at times going to educate the church about scriptural organization. You know, many times church members don't know. I can tell you this. Do not overestimate how much Bible the church member knows. You may think everybody knows. Not everybody knows. And especially if they've never been in a church that has scriptural organization, how would they know? Except they've been in the Word themselves. But we know that not everyone does that. So you preach about the qualifications of elders. By the way, don't overestimate what people know about that. One time I had someone suggest that a particular man should be an elder. Not only did he not have faithful children, he had no children, and he'd never been married. I don't know how you can own a Bible and think that he's qualified to be an elder. So I'm saying don't assume that people know what they should know. You're going to have to educate them about the qualifications. Not only that, the responsibilities of elders. What is it they do? Are we just wanting to get elders so we can say we have elders, but we don't know what they're supposed to do? No. This is not the Queen of England. Okay, it's not a title without a job. It's a job more than it's a title. It's a description. They're overseers. They're shepherds of God's people. There's jobs to do. There's responsibilities. What about this? What is the congregation's responsibility to them? The Bible speaks about that too. Hebrews 13:7 and 17, and 1 Peter 5:1-4. You see, the church needs to know this. Even if you don't yet have men who are qualified, the church still needs to know this, right? I mean, this is New Testament doctrine. This is how you organize the family of God. So even if we're not yet ready, we need to know it. And if we don't know it, we certainly can't get ready. So we need to focus. And I'm telling you, the man in the pulpit is the one with the best position to positively influence the church in thinking about, in desiring, and then ultimately obtaining scriptural organization. Where it happens, it's because of the evangelist. Where it doesn't happen, it is often because he objects it, or he doesn't think about it, or he doesn't want it. Number 5, another practical consideration. Once he has educated the congregation and helped guide them through the selection process, now he should probably be the one who presides over the ordainment. Preside over the ordaining. You know, the word ordain just simply means to appoint. So there comes this time when these men are officially appointed and then recognized as shepherds of this congregation. And there is no specific way that is to be done. The Bible doesn't tell us how it's done. I can tell you what I've been involved in, but basically we would have the men maybe even come up in front of the congregation, thank them for their willingness to serve, express to them the congregation's confidence in their ability to serve, and then pray for them. And you know, it doesn't have to be an elaborate celebration. It doesn't have to even be an official event. But there's some point at which these men are now officially appointed and therefore recognized as the shepherds of this congregation. And you, as the one who has started this process and educated through this process and been with the congregation every step of the way, it's probably best for you to be in charge of and preside over that ordainment. And to reemphasize the importance, to reemphasize the responsibilities on both parts. Because sheep and shepherds have expectations of each other, rightfully so. And so it's probably best for you to be the one to preside, to pray for them, to hold them up, and to be in charge of this very important, and if you've never had elders before, this monumentous occasion where this particular family of God is now finally scripturally organized. One more practical consideration. For you, the evangelist, who has been in charge of leading this process, number 6, remember that you are under their authority. You see, the evangelist never has authority over the eldership. Never has, never will. Even if he has been there longer than them, and I know some preachers who have been there longer than the elders. I know some preachers who knew some of their elders, his elders, when they were boys. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he has been a Christian longer than they have. It doesn't matter if he's the one who led in the appointing of them. It doesn't matter. As a member of the congregation, the preacher must also submit to their authority. Hebrews 13, 7 and 17. And so, you know, the preacher who appoints the leadership, the eldership, is not to see himself as a parent who gave birth to a child, but rather as a humble servant of God who helped make things the way God wants them to be. Nothing more and nothing less. And so, again, it is God's desire that we have completely organized churches. If your church right now is scripturally unorganized, that's scriptural. But it ought to be a goal to one day be scripturally organized. That needs to be a goal. And if it's never a goal, if it's never a priority, I can tell you this, it will never happen. Elderships don't just happen. They don't just fall out of the sky. They don't just show up. It has to be intentional. It has to be a priority. And the evangelist is going to be the one who leads in that. All right, now I'll stop and I'll field questions and comments and observations about this subject. Yes, in the back. Well, no. And, I think obviously if we know to do right, we should do it. James says what? If you know to do right and you don't do it, it's still sin. Yes. But there are those who are in different levels of influence. And my point here is that the one who is the evangelist, or evangelists, maybe plural in a congregation, they are in the best position to make this happen. And so that's really my focus is that, if you're an evangelist, and I have been one for a long time, I know you can see a benefit to no elders. I know you can see that. But I'm telling you, I have, for probably 19 years, I worked with elders. And I can tell you it's preferred. Even for your own benefit. Even for your own work. That doesn't make it scriptural, okay? I'm not saying that's why we should, but I'm telling you, if you're an evangelist who's hesitant because you don't want to have to work under elders, I'm telling you, you don't understand. You don't understand the benefits of doing things the way God wants them to be done. Now, we need to move carefully. We don't want to be in a rush and we just appoint someone because they're willing. You don't want that because it's easier to get someone than to get rid of someone. You don't want that. So I'm not saying we rush out. I'm saying the opposite. We move slowly and carefully and patiently, but at least we're moving in that direction. And the problem with most churches is they're not even moving in that direction. They've been sitting in the same place and they're happy with it and they're satisfied with it, and especially the preacher. And nothing's happened. Yes, Becky. Right. I agree. Yes. And I think, the point about the mentoring, because the number one problem in most places is the lack of qualified men. That's the number one challenge in most places. And it's because the standards are so high, men do not just automatically become qualified. But we need to be looking for ways to make sure that they are. For example, I'll give you an example. I preached for a church one time where the preacher always taught the adult Bible class. Sunday morning, Wednesday night, the preacher always taught the adult Bible class. And there was only one adult Bible class. Now think about that. Okay, that seems good. We've got this guy, supposedly he knows the Bible, and he's teaching the class. Maybe he is the best Bible teacher in the congregation. He should be. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But think down the road. I went to my elders and I said, okay, I'm teaching every adult class. How are we going to have new elders in the future when one of the qualifications is that he has proven himself to be an effective teacher? Are we thinking about that? And they had not. And they're elders. They're qualified, but they had not thought about, if we're doing this, the end result is going to be this, you see. So again, it has to be intentional, and it has to be a priority, and it has to be something that we focus on in order to have men who are qualified. And yes, it is a universal truth that the women are the backbone of the congregation. And if it wasn't for male leadership and only men being able to do that, I think a lot of our men would just turn that over to the women too, and men would do nothing. Am I being honest here? So thankfully, at least God said, men, I want you to be in leadership role, so you'll do something. So we need to take a hard look, at ourselves and see, why is it that this congregation I'm a member of, we've been here 20 years, 30 years, whatever years, and we have never once been scripturally organized. There are different answers to that. And I don't know, I don't have enough knowledge. I'm not making accusations because I just got here yesterday. I don't know anything. But I am saying what I've observed in other places, and these are some things that are commonly true. It's back here in the striped shirt. Right? Right. Yeah. So they think it's their church and not God's. Isn't that right? I mean, isn't that the ultimate? If that's the kind of thinking, if. Well, I think it's true in some cases. I don't think it's the answer to everything, but yes, I think you're probably right. And it just means that we're not willing to do things God's way because we have our own way. Yes, and the back. Yeah, well, that's one of the most common questions you get about qualifications of elders. He is to have faithful children. Another question is how many children? Does it have to be more than one? That isn't that a common question? I don't believe it has to be more than one. I think one meets the qualification. He uses the word children in 1 Timothy 3. He uses the same exact word, 1 Timothy 5, I think it's 4, talking about widows. Their children should show them respect. So if we're going to say the word children always means more than one, then that means that if she has only one child, he doesn't have to show her respect. If we're going to be consistent. Same word, same book, same response. So, but also, if his children were faithful, I'm going to show you my opinion, okay? I'm going to tell you my opinion. And I think it fulfills the rationale. Because what's the reason for his having his family under control? What's the reason? If he can't control his own family, he can't control the church, okay? That's the reason. You can't forget that. Sometimes we view these qualifications like a checklist. And I'm telling you, that's not the best way to do it. And I believe that if when his children were at home, they were under his control, and they were faithful, and they were what they should have been, that years later, when they are now gone, I don't believe that disqualifies him. Unless their life is so bad, so well known, notorious, that it actually affects people's opinion of him. Okay, I'm going to add that one exception, because I know a man who would like to be an elder. He has two sons. One is faithful. One is in prison for murder. And it was a notorious murder. It was all in the news, and it was a lot of terrible details. Now, same situation, but I'm telling you, when your son is in the state penitentiary for a notorious murder that was known all over the region where you live, you're going to have a difficult time getting past that, okay? So I'm going to add that in there. But the qualification is there so that he could prove that while he had them under his control, he ruled his household well. And once he has proven that, then I think that qualification has been proven, even if now his 35-year-old son no longer attends worship service. That's my opinion. I know others have different opinions, but I think mine's right. Okay, hold on. We had a lot of hands. We had a hand right here. Well, you said one thing I disagree with. You said it's about time we start. And I'm telling you it's past time. Let me ask you this. Why do you plant a mango tree? So that you can get some mangoes. Tomorrow? In the future. So when's the best time to plant a mango tree? No, yesterday was the best time. Today is the next best time, you see. And that's why we have to be viewing this. And so, yeah, I think you're right. There's some idea that, well, this is probably down the road, so we don't need to think about it. Well, that's wrong. And that's completely opposite thinking. If it was already here, we wouldn't have to think about it. But because it is down the road, even more, we have to be thinking about it, and we have to be planning for it. And I'm telling you, the evangelist is in the perfect position to make it a priority for the congregation. People will just keep doing what they've always been doing unless they can be shown that they need to do something different. And you are in a position of influence. And that's why I was happy to have this opportunity to talk to you, because you are the ones who are going to either make it happen or try to make it happen and make it a priority, or just do what he just said and just kick the can down the road. Good. I hope so. And I hope the next time I'm here, someone has already moved forward with it. By the way, I am forthright, as you noticed, because I know that you are good and honest men, and because I'm leaving tomorrow. So even if you get mad, I'm leaving. Okay, yes, over here, and then here. Yeah. Well, let me back up. One of the courses that I teach in our schools is leadership. And some of the things we've talked about today, but then also most of the courses you would imagine spent on church leadership. And I have been teaching that since 2003. And I began to notice people saying, but how do you even start? Right? It's like when you apply for a job that requires you have experience, but you can't get a job because you don't have experience, but you can't get experience because you don't have a job. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I put this lesson together, to offer some practical suggestions on how to get things moving. One thing we have to remember, we don't have to have all the potential questions answered to move forward. Okay? If we want to sit still and imagine every question, every scenario, well, then we're paralyzed. You know enough. I know now, today, you already know enough to begin moving forward, to begin looking for prospects, to begin studying. What are the responsibilities of elders? What are the obligations? What do they do? What are the congregations supposed to do? It's all here, okay? It's all here. And by the way, yes, there are qualifications. But most of those are things that God expects of all of us. And so, for example, if there's this man whose faithfulness comes and goes, well, that's a concern for his own soul's sake, not even thinking about him being a shepherd one day. So we ought to be concerned about that regardless. And so those are just a few observations here. Yeah, and there are always going to be those that we're trying to encourage to greater faithfulness, and we should be doing that anyway. But then some of them perhaps will mature to the point they actually are the ones now who can be a shepherd to now oversee the flock. The best time to plant that mango tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is today. And I think we have to view things in that way. Hands, okay, back here in the very back. Yeah, I completely agree. There are two extremes. You could say moving too fast and not moving at all. Probably the latter is the most common. I don't know, maybe you know, but probably the main problem has not been pushing too hard. It's been not pushing at all. And it doesn't need to be either one of those extremes. Just because you don't want your meat burned doesn't mean you're going to eat it raw. Okay? So somewhere between those extremes is the way we should be moving. But most of the time, we're not even moving because it isn't a priority. It does not take much for people to begin to look for some flaw, some inconsistency, and then they believe that they don't have to listen to you because you aren't perfect either. Real quick, let me list two things that are common mistakes when we think about elders. Number one, we often think they have to be old because we think that word elder means older. Take the E and put in an O. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't refer to age at all. Can a man be 40 years old, have proven himself to meet have all of these qualities, have one wife, have faithful children at 40 years old? Sure. Gets married at 22. I got married at 22. He has a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. Why is he not qualified? Because he's not 70? The other mistake we make sometimes is to expect too much. At the end of the day, he is not perfect. Yes, 5 years ago, during a church picnic, you remember when he got upset at someone during the soccer game. You remember that? Oh, he can't be an elder. He got mad. I remember that. Oh, he got mad when they... Really? Come on, guys. We cannot be expecting perfection. If you're looking for an old man who is perfect before you can have elders, you'll never have elders. Will never be. Santa Claus. I guess Santa Claus is an old man who's perfect. And after that, I don't know who else. So be on guard against that. Those are two things that two mistakes I've often seen. So, bottom line, if it's going to happen, if you're going to begin finally moving in this direction, it is going to be the evangelist who kickstarts it. You're going to have to be the catalyst to develop interest, to plant the seed, to educate the congregation, to help them see it as a priority. Otherwise, you know the law of physics. Everything not in motion will stay not in motion at rest unless what? There's an external force. You can be that external force to finally get it moving in that direction. And I'm telling you, it may actually, once it gets moving, sometimes things pick up momentum faster than you even realize they will. I think it'll happen. You can't tell me out of these 11 congregations, there isn't one that's not really close. Not really close. I believe there probably is. And with more of an emphasis, with more of a priority, with more attention, it can happen. And again, the goal is not to add elders. The goal is to make the church what God always intended for it to be. That's the goal. To have it scripturally organized, just like He said He wanted it to be. Again, I've enjoyed being with you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being here. Let's close with a word of prayer. Holy Father, we thank you for loving us. We thank you for forgiving us and making us members of your family. And we're thankful that we have opportunities to lead. We have opportunities to influence others for good. Help us to not take that lightly, but to take advantage of that opportunity. Help us to be catalysts for good and to lead things in the ways that you want them to go. Be with us and bless us. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.